Operations and Monitoring Committee meeting on the 6th of May 2021. I'd like to welcome you, welcome our public, welcome our executive team, and also welcome our media who is present today. Just a reminder to please have your mobile phones turned off or on silent, and we will take a morning break around 11 a.m. with lunch around 12:30. I'd now like to ask Councillor Kumar to open up our meeting with our council prayer.
Kia hihi re, e te atua kaha rawa, koko I te rohu rangatira, te tohu ātuanga. Manakitia mai matau, waupanunga ai tenei wā, e mahi ni e matau. Mahi, mō te painga o nā tangata, o te kaunihera o nā Rotorua. Takua mai kia tau te rangimariki runga I amatau ai nā wā katoa. Ko ihu, karaiti, hokoto, mātau ariki. Amini.
Namaste.
Almighty God, who alone is the leader of all mankind and the fountain of all knowledge, send thy blessing upon us, your servants this day, as we strive to do all things good for the betterment of the people of the Rotorua district. May we be tolerant in ourselves at all times. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kumar. I now call for any apologies.
Thank you.
Yes, Mrs. Bray?
Rawiri Waru.
Kia ora, thank you very much. We just have an apology from Rawiri. There appear to be no others. And moved Councillor Yates, seconded her worship the Mayor. The apologies be accepted from Mr. Waru. All those in favour, please say aye. Carried, thank you very much. Any declarations of interest this morning? There appear to be none. Any urgent items not on the agenda? There appear to be none. We will move then to the confirmation of minutes. We are on page 6. I ask for a mover and a seconder that the minutes of the Operations and Monitoring Committee meeting 8th of April 2021 be confirmed as a true and correct record. Moved by Councillor Kumar, seconded by Councillor Bentley. Thank you. We're into our reports. For financial performance, I ask for a mover and a seconder to receive the report, financial performance for the 9 months ended 30 March 2021. Moved by Councillor Donald, seconded by all those in favour, please say aye. Carried. Thank you. I'd like to invite Thomas Colley to present to his presentation, and I believe we have a PowerPoint this morning as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, councillors and board members. I'll be brief today. Obviously, take the report as read. The result itself is very consistent with what I've been talking about at O&M probably for the last 4 to 5 months now. So overall, we are tracking better than budget. It's a small decline on last month. We were about 800,000 better than budget, but we're currently now about 700,000. This is on the back of operational expenditure being significantly higher in some area. As you recall, we were doing one-off projects that were funded by the PGF and MB with regards to the post-COVID work schemes of getting people employed. And so those additional costs are actually being offset by additional revenues, and so mitigating each other to the point where we are tracking better than budget. From an activity to activity perspective, the cost pressures themselves that we're facing are consolidated in just a couple of areas. Planning and regulatory, obviously a little bit of pressure around the parking revenues, however, being offset by the fact that substantially more revenue for the consenting, but also additional costs and consultancy costs that are helping to push through that huge demand in that area at the moment. Sewerage and sewage, reductions just in some trade waste volume, so that's a reduction in revenues and a non-cash expense increase around depreciation. And community leadership, that's the activity that's probably incurring the majority of the expenditure that relates to the housing initiatives that are currently being undertaken and inner city safety as such as well. And so those are, in particular those security patrols, that's the activity that is incurring those costs. But again, overall, tracking ahead of budget. And just that reminder as well is that the budget that we are reporting here is actually that stretch budget that we've set ourselves. So against our annual plan, we're actually tracking about closer to 1.5 to 1.7 million better than budget, which is actually a quite pleasing result. There's a couple of things sitting to the side though that we know that are coming up. There's the $1 million resiliency fund with regards to those community grant applications that we're quite well progressed through with regards to the approval of those. They're not reflected in the result. The reality is we've budgeted from a CapEx perspective, but they actually need to be reflected from an OpEx perspective, so they'll be pushed through at the end of the year. So obviously they'll pull the result down, and there's a couple of redundancy costs as well that relate to processes from several months ago that will also be pushed through. So those are just a couple of one-off items that will actually pull the result back at the end of the year as part of that annual report. But from an operational perspective, very pleasing that we are tracking in the way that we are. From a capital works perspective, a mixed story. So overall, it is a significantly large program of work, probably the largest that we had to date with regards to 120 million. To date, I think we're tracking at about 50 plus million, 49.9, sorry. Within that though, our renewal program of about 22.4 million, we've completed 21 million of those renewals. So it's very pleasing to see that with regards to the investment of looking after and renewing our infrastructure, a very, very high completion rate across the board there. And with regards to the tracking behind the budget and where we anticipate it to be, just a reminder that we are anticipating not spending as much as we had thought on the lakefront, the Performing Arts Centre, the museum, Rotorua, Rotorua, and we've talked about before with regards to the defers and the delays in those projects, and many of those are now well underway and are reflected actually in next year's budget. With regards to a debt position, so we were anticipating ending the year at about 276 million, so that was obviously on the back of a significant investment through the capital works. With the deferment in those and actually the strong position in our operating result as well, as we anticipate borrowing about 35 million less than anticipated, we're on a track to achieving that as well. And so overall, year to date, our operating result is tracking better than budget. Our CapEx is actually broadly in line where we expect it to be. We know there's a number of projects that have been delayed, deferred, but we also know that with regards to our underlying renewal program, a very high completion rate, and our debt at the moment is where we expect it to be. And at the end of the year, we expect our OpEx to be broadly in line with budget, hopefully better. CapEx to be underspent with regards to the deferment of those projects, and as a result, our debt will be significantly less than planned as well. From a macro national perspective, I guess, nearly 43,000 New Zealanders vaccinated to date. Hopefully that ramps up significantly. There's mixed opinions as to whether the Trans-Tasman bubble is actually achieving what it set out to achieve with regards to driving economic activity between the two countries, but I'm sure as things stabilise and people get used to that we may see an uptick of that. The national median house price increased by $46,000 last month, which was probably an outstanding, probably one of the largest jumps that it's ever had in a month. And obviously we're all aware of with regards to the government's housing policies and the vulnerabilities. And there's some commentary around the lack of business investment that's taking place in New Zealand. And it's probably highlighted by a graph that I came across the other day. And this graph I know is busy, so I'll try and explain it to you. Each of the lines, red, yellow, blue and green, indicates the sectors of our economy: housing, personal spending, business or agriculture. And it reflects the annual change in borrowing rates. So as it's above zero, it means that those sectors are borrowing more than they did before as a percentage, and if it drops below zero, it means that they're borrowing less than they used to. And I guess I'll draw your attention to 2009 when the GFC hit. You'll see there that annual growth in borrowing was significant. The crunch kind of had, and there was no surprise from a housing perspective. It was very difficult to borrow from banks for both housing and businesses, and as a result, the percentage of lending in particularly plummeted. And as you can see, that actually it dipped below, in particular for business, and there was actually a decline in sector lending. So that was where banks were actually foreclosing and were not actually willing to refinance and do those sorts of things. And it took a long time, as you can see, to kind of build back up, but we never built back up to the lofty percentages of growth and lending that we did before the GFC. And the interesting thing since then is obviously the COVID lockdown, and you can kind of see that things plummeted. Personal lending has probably dropped the lowest, as you can see, it's ever been. And business lending in particular is getting close to probably where we were post-GFC. Agriculture has dropped as well. So they're actually shrinking now with regards to lending. The anomaly is housing, and it's probably no surprise with regards to what we're seeing. And so I guess what it does provide is a snapshot of what New Zealand's current economy is probably made up of, and it's probably made up of the back of housing and construction and people making money off housing. And it'll be interesting to see, therefore, going forward with regards to what happens, not only from New Zealand's perspective, but Rotorua Inc.'s perspective. What will the flow-on effects be of that decline in personal lending, that decline in business lending, even farm lending, and what will that impact be on our economy, on our people, on our jobs? And I think for me personally, the opportunity is probably construction and housing. Housing comes with the construction sector, which comes with jobs. So I guess there's an opportunity going forward that as we push to free up more land, push to obviously get more housing, that we actually might see that sector coming in Rotorua to support that and create jobs. So just thought a little interesting snippet there. So with that, any questions that you may have?
Thank you very much, Thomas. Councillor McPherson, followed by Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair. Very interesting report. Couple of questions. The Infracore MBI employment project, has that been projected out to a tail-off process?
So that's actually now finished. That was a one-off project through roading, which was tied to clearing of stormwater drains, and that's now completed. Yep. Thanks
very much. Second of three questions. The added security costs of $442,000, is that anticipating the discussions in the LTP where we're proposing to put either $500,000 or another $1 million into community safety?
Sorry, the question again?
These added security costs of 442, is that anticipating the discussions and the possible outcomes of the community safety proposal to add another half or another full $1 million to the community safety program?
I get what you're meaning. How do I answer this? The two are tied, but they're not related. So I guess the 420 currently reflects our current investment to date into that area, which will continue towards the end of this financial year. I guess there is still a separate decision ahead of you with regards to the LTP as to how much more investment you wish to put into that place. And so if you do make that decision, then hopefully, therefore, the budgets will be set appropriately going forward, that we won't at this time see that additional cost coming in because there's an additional service.
Okay, the last question, thanks for that. The last question concerns the public servant pay freeze announced this morning, or last night. Is that going to affect our budget?
So not really related to this, but I will remind councillors that as part of the LTP discussions that we have not built inflation into our year one budgets, and one of those was actually around salary budgets as well. I think the question you need to be asking yourselves is the pressure that those sorts of things can come on. So I was actually talking to a local employer last week in the manufacturing. They were actually commenting on the fact that they can't freeze their wages, and if anything, they can't even stick to inflation, and they're having to actually provide 8 to 10% pay increases, and they've gone from paying $35 an hour to $45 an hour just to retain staff and just to be competitive. And so I think Caution would be therefore that we do have a highly skilled workforce and it is a competitive environment. The need to weigh up the public interest with regards to freezing salaries and retaining and recruiting talented staff, you have to find that mix. But at the moment, our budgets do reflect therefore a proposed zero increase for next year at this stage.
Thanks very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Chair. Through you. Thomas, just the operational surplus, and you're expecting to end the year pretty much on target there. How exposed are we to electricity prices? Just we've had a really dry autumn and, I hear some of the commentary out there. So I think we're still on the floating rate. Is that correct?
No. So it's been a little while now, but for the last close to 18 months, we've been fixed. I think we fixed in December 2019. So the volatility that has been experienced in the sector, we haven't faced. If anything, the challenge for us is the fixed pricing is tiered. So as we go into winter, our fixed pricing does increase a little bit because obviously demand does. But we've made adequate provision and we're not seeing the types of price fluctuations and cost increases that we'd probably experienced 2018, 2019. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Bentley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just your opinion here, Thomas, with regard to the cost of security in town, with the removal of the city focus and the doing away with a permanent police presence in the centre of town, do you feel that this has added to our security costs?
It's not appropriate for me to comment on, sorry.
Unfortunately, not part of our, that was a decision that was made by the police, obviously, although I understand that their presence is missed in the community. Was there any other question you wanted to ask? Okay, thank you. I think we can take that point as noted, certainly, though. Were there any other questions? Well, there appear to be none. Thank you very much, Thomas. We will now move to our non-financial performance for the 6 months ended 31st of December on page 14. Yeah. On page 14, I'll ask for a mover and a seconder that the report non-financial performance for the 6 months ended 31 December 2020 be received. Moved by Councillor Okawa-Tate, seconded by Councillor Wang. All those in favour, please say aye. Thank you. I'd now like to invite Una Hopkins to speak to her presentation this morning for us. Thank you, Una.
Thank you and good morning. So you've got the report there in your papers today. This is looking at the performance management framework from a non-financial perspective, and these are the results for the 6 months leading up to December the 31st. What I'm going to do to start with is just to give a really high-level overview of how the whole framework is tracking, and then to go through activity by activity, just looking at some of the highlights and some of the challenges that are being faced within each of those areas. So this presentation does follow exactly the same format that we presented to you at the end of last financial year, so there's some consistency there in reporting style. So just to go over again that the...
Sorry, Una. Yes?
Just not enjoying the laughter opposite now that the media's left about the community safety question from Councillor Bentley. We're listening to the operating report, non-performance report. So
Not quite a point of order, but we will just call for order.
Yeah.
And we'll let Una to continue. Thank you, Una.
Cool. Yes, so just to reiterate that the performance management framework that we're talking about still relates to the current LTP that you were working under, so that's the 2018 LTP, and this is providing results on year 3 of that framework. I guess what's a reflection from us as staff in terms of a non-financial performance framework is that there is a need to ensure that the measures that you put in place at the beginning of your 3-year term can be flexible enough to be adaptable to the changing environment that we have around us. And of course, at the time when many of these measures were set, we didn't have the global pandemic that we were facing and the other associated challenges. So that's something for us to reflect on and take forward as we look at setting new measures that can reflect well the council's performance. Under the current framework, we group together everything that the council does under 10 groups of activities, and they are up there as follows. And within that, that means we have a framework consisting of 62 measures across those activities. So how are we doing? Lots of words up there, so I think I'll actually just skip to this slide here. So as of the 31st of December, of the 62 measures that we have, we know that there will be 3 that will not be measured, and that's the same as last financial year. Those 3 measures that are not going to be measured are the result of changes to legislation and the fact that the data sources are no longer available. So for the purposes of reporting, we have removed those 3 from our overall framework. So reporting here, of those that we can measure, we're talking about 59 measures. And we, at this point in time, are 54% on track for completion, with another 49% which are in that area of needing improvement or at this stage are unlikely to be met. Looking at a group of activity by groups of activities, and starting with arts and culture, this is an area where utilisation is impacting that overall reflection of the measures. And this is where we're still seeing the impacts of COVID and most recently that latest Auckland lockdown where we were impacted by the rest of New Zealand being in a level 3. From a community leadership perspective, again, some real challenges in this space. And I think what this is reflecting is that increasing expectations from the community on council being leaders of the community and are directly related to everything that's going on in our district around us. From a planning and regulatory point of view, the areas there that are of needing attention and are unlikely to be met at the end of the year continue to be around the consenting issues there and the timeliness of being able to get those consents processed and available. And we've had lots of challenges in that space. And they continue to be spaces there. Just pointing out though there that we've got our dogs registration process continues to be an exemplar in this space, and that target continues like it has been in the past to be met and exceeded. In terms of a district development space, this is one here which the area is being heavily impacted by measures that we can no longer measure. When the framework was set up 3.5 years ago, a measure was included there around GDP, and at the time we were doing really well in that space. The overall framework for the measurement of GDP has changed, and that is beyond our capability and capacity to do anything in that space. The measurement framework is set externally from us, and that one has impacted all councils in the district, and so many councils who were previously doing well in terms of being above average in terms of GDP, now no longer achieve that at all, and our conclusion is that it is no longer a good benchmark for us. And the last one down there on the bottom is just that another measure that we'd set up at the beginning of the framework was around our electronic transactions in the CBD. This has proven to be cost prohibitive to actually get the result for this one. Some really good news: sports, recreation and environment continues to show all green, so 6 measurement areas there. Visitation, utilisation of our open spaces and our spaces to recreate continues to grow and continues to meet those performance measures. Roads and footpaths is in a sort of a position of covering all bases is there. Our safety results are showing positive results, as to our sealed road network completion, and of course that relates nicely to Thomas talking about the progress in the overall renewals space. And then I guess the utilisation is slightly below the target there, and that potentially will sort of increase as we look at the different trials around safety to school and initiatives like that. The Sewerage and Sewage, 5 measures there, and again these ones continue to be met and exceeded. The stormwater and land drainage area, these ones, just to reiterate, of course, the infrastructure measures are mandatory set for us, so these are the ones where you can get some comparatives against other councils, and we continue to do really well in these places. Of course, these measures here are also at the mercy, I guess, of the environment around us, being based on flooding and the likes. Here, really positive that there have been no such events. Waste management continues to have some issues there in terms of, I guess it's public perception and confusion around what's going on globally from a recycling perspective. And as you will recall, this area relates back to a presentation that was brought to SPNF last month around looking at initiatives and going out later on this year around engaging with our community around organic waste collection. And lastly, we've got the water supply. So again, some pretty hefty measures in there around full compliance and demand management, and being totally met in those spaces as well. So just in conclusion, I just want to say that in terms of where we are at this point in time, we're in a very comparable place to the same time last year. I said at the beginning we were looking at this point of our overall framework having 54% of those measures being met, and that was against a 52% position same time last year. So I'm happy to take any questions. That's the end of my presentation.
Thank you very much, Rena. Thank you for overviewing the non-financial performance. If there are any questions or points of clarification on the process of the measuring, then we'll let Una take them now. And if there are any details around the operational side of it, then we can easily take those in the operational report when the managers are present to follow. So if there are any questions, I believe Councillor Kumar, did you have one?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And through the Chair, just needed a clarification. Una, you just mentioned that there was an SPNF presentation on organic waste. While it is in the non-financial performance stage at this time, how does it affect it that it's not in the LTP if we are to introduce organic waste?
So it is signalled in the LTP. You'll recall that at the very beginning of the Mahi document, there is a timeline around other consultation pieces of work, and the expectation is that the team will go out for community feedback on whether that service is wanted, I suppose, by the community, and then that then feeds into a discussion with the community in terms of the next annual plan as to the costs of that additional service.
Thank you for clarifying that. Were there any other questions? There appear to be none. Thank you very much, Rena. Well, it's a lot of different areas to cover, so we'll now go into the operational report by our managers. I'll ask for a mover and a seconder that we receive the operational report for March 2020. Moved by Mr. Hurd, seconded by Councillor Yates. All those in favour, please say aye. Thank you. And we are now on page 17. I'd like to invite back Thomas Colley to overview the business support group, page 17 to 17.
Happy to answer any questions.
I'll just give elected members a second to find it on their agenda. Yes, Councillor O'Connor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Under the business support group, I see. Oh no, sorry, it's the wrong one. Beg your pardon. Thank you.
So close. There do appear to be no questions. Thank you, Thomas. We'll move to the Manahautu Māori, Ginarangi. We're on page 17 to 20. If there are any questions, then please let us know and we'll see if we can answer them. Yes, Councillor O'Connor.
It's my one, Madam Chair, and it's not a question really, but if you've just, it's just around the Noho Marae program that was made available for all councillors to attend, and I did attend that. And although much of the content was familiar to me, I have to say that it was a great experience to go back and to reaffirm what I did know, and more importantly, just because of the climate in which we're operating in today, all throughout New Zealand, it was just very, very helpful again to have all of those things, the chronology of events that have taken place in our country since 1940, actually prior to that, to have that highlighted and to sit there with people who were interested and some diverse views as well. It was just so helpful. So I want to thank the council for giving councillors, those who attended, the opportunity, and myself the opportunity to attend. It was so worthwhile. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Kumar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess I was fortunate enough to go to that Noho Marae program as well and was there over 2 days. Unfortunately, I didn't stay the night because I wanted to spare the lovely ladies that were there, as I was going to be the only one that would be snoring out loudly. So, so at about 9:15 that evening, I requested that I could leave there. But I tell you, the couple of days that I was there, I was quite enriched. You seem to know and think you know. I don't know what the cost and the implications are financially to the council, but I tell you what, it was an eye-opener, and it was very enriching to be there to sort of understand just exactly what the council is doing in that space. So I think given that opportunity, and if given any further opportunity to sort of further understand, I would take that opportunity. So I'm very thankful to the council.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kumar, and thank you to those elected members that were able to attend. It was open to not only councillors but also our Lakes and our Rural Community Board and our Te Tata o Te Arua members, and there were a selection of us from all of there, and also acknowledge that this is the first time that it's been open to specifically elected members, but of course our staff are also going through, which is such a wonderful program. So we now have a question from Her Worship the Mayor.
Not a question really, but a request that councillors do take note of the art exhibition in the Galleria that changed last night in partnership with Toi Ohomai, an emerging young Māori artist, Sydney Murray, and it's about our homes, and it's very pertinent with our housing strategy. So it's talking about don't judge a book by its cover. We want to value what happens in our homes, and we want warm, dry, resilient homes. It's a beautiful exhibition. So do bring your friends and families up.
Thank you very much. There appears to be no other questions, but I hope that that great feedback can go back to Gina and her team. We will move to the strategy group, and I'd like to invite... No, I won't. We're on page 20 to page 21. On our agenda for the strategy group. Were there any questions in there for us? There do appear to be none, but I'll just give you a minute to check. Okay, well, we'll move on to our operations group. I'd like to invite Jocelyn McHardy up to the table. We are on page 21, and we have a brief PowerPoint and I believe some drone footage from Jocelyn this morning. Welcome.
Morena tātou. I want to invite Amy up, who's put our presentation together today, just to talk to the presentation and walk us through the how the redevelopment's occurring.
Morena koutou. So we've had the latest round of drone footage come through, so the intention was really to show you that before it gets released later today. And while I'm here to give you a bit of an update in terms of how the project is tracking. So we'll start with the drone footage update. And just one note on there, we just need to get a slight correction made because the final date says April 2020, so I think the videographer hadn't quite updated that to say 2021, so we'll get that edited before we send that out. Oh, Hilda's busy pushing me ahead. Okay, so just an update on where we're at. So you've seen this graphic before with the various stages of the Lakefront project. So stage 4, which is the Memorial Plaza, so that was completed late March, and we had a small karakia opening on the 1st of April, ready for Easter weekend and also for the Anzac Parade. Just a note as well, we've had RSA involvement in this part of the developed project, and they've been very supportive of the work and how it's turned out, which is great. And actually overall we've had really positive feedback from people in terms of the standard and the quality of that facility, and I know that the local firm Campbell Construction are really proud of how that's turned out, which is great to know. So just another note as well, because it might come up as a question, is that currently we haven't got time limited parking signage and so on up yet, but the intention is to make that time limited because it is a car park to access the recreation in terms of the lakefront rather than sort of all day parking. So that will happen in the next month or so before we lose any more parks near the playground for the next stage. Just a note as well that actually came in under budget. So we had a budget for that stage and we had a contingency allowance, and we ended up coming in and not using any of the contingency and coming slightly under budget, which was really nice to end that stage that way. Just a few photos just to show you, if you haven't been down there, how it looks. So that's, I guess, the RSA memorial at the entrance there. These photos are just from the karakia opening that we had. And then this is a bit more of a later shot in that area, kind of closest to the lake, where it's all come up nice and green now, perfect time for growing grass. So in that nice space in terms of the, I guess, sort of a quiet, relaxing type space there. Okay, moving on to the next stage, which is the Lakefront section in terms of the boardwalks and so on. So that's expected to be completed late next month. There's been a huge amount of progress when I'll show you some photos shortly. We do have still a little bit of risk around some of the minor items due to COVID, so it's quite interesting, like odd things like additives for paint, like a reflective kind of additive to go into the paint that goes on the light posts, for example, has been difficult to get. Also our luminaires for the lighting and so on. So they should have arrived now in terms of, and that is essentially what's driving that June date as opposed to a late May. Nothing massive, but just little things that are starting to show up with COVID that, you know, make things a little bit trickier to manage, but we're overall really happy with how this is going as well. It's also on budget. We had Minister Nash visit when he was in Rotorua last week, and I understand that he mentioned his visit several times throughout the day at his various other engagements and how happy and impressed he was in terms of the progress that had been made. So again, just a couple of photos of that visit. We had lots of our partners there as well, so we had Pukero Aruawhata Trust in terms of the spa development. We had the QE represented, we had our mana whenua representatives, we had Lionel there showing his artwork and how that's progressing in terms of for the Cultural Foundation. Tamati Coffee, there were a few others that joined for that walk around. It was a beautiful day and Nicoletta's done a great job taking a few pics. You can see there looking back, the Tukutuku bridges are in now, and that's just timber there on that was being ready to be installed in the large Tukutuku bridges. Just on the terracing. And you can see that there's planting that's now gone in. I think that's when you were last visited, probably a lot of the planting wasn't there, so there's Infracore have been there doing the planting work of late, and the lime chip pathways are starting to go in or be formed, ready to go in. And there's the site that obviously it will be cleaned before it's open, but the cycle path that connects all the way around to Motatata Point and then back around to Sanatorium Reserve. So that part of the lakefront piece is in now. And that's out on the bit of the boardwalk that juts out where the reflection seat will go. Okay, so where are we at now? We're currently underway with stage 2 and we'll start stage 3 late next month. So stage 2 is the new playground and where the toilet will go. So that the toilet construction should also start middle of this year, and that area is all meant to be, all planned to be completed in late November, early December. Early days for those 2 stages of work, but currently tracking on budget as well. Don't have a lot of pictures for this one, just really the preparatory works that they're doing in terms of that site there. And then the last stages, so we've got the top round yellow area is stages 5 to 7, so the detailed design for that is underway now. We were just calling it stage 5, but we've actually broken that into 3 sections to enable us to start and to stage that work with, I guess, minimum interference in terms of operators and so on and the use of that space. So the first stage will be stage 5, which is the lake edge stage boardwalk area. The intention there is working with HEB, who have already done all of the other boardwalk area and have, I guess, the skills and the experience and the contacts and so on. So we're working through a procurement process at the moment around that. And then the next stage would be the lower, the south end where the car park is, and then the final stage, stage 7, would be the bit in the middle. The Whare Waka architectural and geotech design is underway, and local firm DCA are working on that, and we should have a concept for you to be able to see next month. Maybe pop that in the O&M report. And then the last piece there is that connection to each street or to Tanakai Street. That's planned to be finished in April next year, although we may change it around slightly with 5, 6 and 7 depending on how things play out. But all in all, we should be complete by the end of next year. And that's it.
Thank you very much. We'll take questions on this presentation. First, we've got Councillor Kumar, followed by Her Worship the
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you very much, Jocelyn and Emmy. Looking very good at this stage. My concern is particularly around this and everything on the lakefront that's happening with regards to the lakefront's always had black swans and seagulls. How are we going to control those from, or what factors are we going to look at to mitigate the problems of the pollution that they created previously?
So there will be an operational program in place in terms of cleaning and I guess presenting the lakefront. It's probably more of a question for Rob, but his team are working with, I guess, how do we manage, I guess, the birds and the mess that they make. Obviously, there's also, we have storms with northerly winds that blow in lakeweed, just general cleaning of paths and keeping things tidy. So yes, we're definitely mindful that there is some work involved in no matter what the design, I guess, dealing with the swans are there, we have to deal with them in terms of the mess that they make and keep it tidy and presentable.
Thank you. Through the chair again, just supplementary to my comment on that was because previously it was a beautiful lakefront and we've spent $40 million on it, and previously nature allowed them to sort of come over and sort of freely move around and they did what they did in their business. But I guess now we're just looking to a more enhanced project, so that's why I asked it.
Thank you, Councillor Kumar. I think some would disagree on it being beautiful before, and certainly with the paving coming apart and falling into the lake and the increase in the storms that we had of the water actually going over it, I think it's a really beautiful, beautifully presented lakefront, and thank you for confirming that we will continue to have an operational scheme behind the scenes to keep it in good nick for our community and visitors. Would now move to Your Worship the Mayor.
There's a question this time. Several young people and also older people have asked if in the playground, so they're narrowing it down now, could we have one of the passive walker exercise machines? Because so many parents and grandparents have to watch their children playing in the playground and would love to do something. And I did just hear you saying that it's under budget at this stage. So I'm not asking for a whole stream of them all around our public walkways, but that is one playground enhancement. We'd love to see it. And I'm sent pictures constantly from people who are lucky enough to visit other playgrounds to see that they're there. I think that would be an added enhancement at some stage.
Kia ora. It's not in the plan at the moment, but we'll take that on board for consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Yates.
Tēnā kōrua, and through you, Madam Chair. Thank you again. I have two questions. The first one is around the Memorial Park and the potential time-limited parking. Can you give us any indication as to what that might look like?
Okay, so we're still having discussions internally in terms of with Rob's team and with our compliance team in terms of the, I guess the duration. At this stage, where we're thinking is in terms of that essentially maybe a 2 to 3 hour kind of is an appropriate time. But again, we need to work through that process internally. I'm not the only person that has I guess to make that call. There may also be a need for some shorter stay parking as well, maybe closer up to the toilets and so on, to ensure that there's always spaces available. I don't believe at this stage that we would be looking at charging. It would just be a time in terms of that, that we don't have people parking there for 8 hours of the day and making it difficult to access from a recreation point of view. But I would just say that we need to work that through with both the compliance and the sport and recreation team to make sure that we've got the right solution there.
Ngā mihi, Amy. Second question is once again around parking, but around just past stage 2 there. I think it actually comes into stage 5. How many more car parks will be made available there? I know that you've mentioned this in a previous meeting, but just to update us, and what will the time limit look like there?
So you're referring to the new car park on the Lake Road side. I don't know the actual figure, Rob might know it off the top of the head, but I know overall we end up with no loss of car parks in terms of the whole of the development, and I think we've got about 70 in the temporary, so it's probably a similar. Okay, we do end up with slightly more overall, and we are working to stagger it so that we don't have periods where we're, having a net reduction of any kind of significant size. So that's partly the work around the stage 5, 6 and 7 is we want to keep that temporary car park where the sound shell used to be open while we're working on the new car park, and then flip to that one so that we always have access down there.
Just in terms of decisions around time limits, and once again we'll have to think that one through in terms of how it will be used and the best ensuring that we're aligning with our parking policy, which is really around ensuring that people can use it. So, and we take into account any other feedback we receive as well.
Bye-bye, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Yates. And not long after we had done the opening karakia and the gates had come down, the car park was full already with people wanting to check it out and use it. So it's a very relevant question. And of course, thank you to Campbell Construction, who are our local contractors that made that beautiful memorial plaza. We will move to Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you, and Councillor Yates already asked most of what I wanted to ask about the time limit and the length, but so I'll ask half a question, still on that area. During ANZAC or major events or even lakeside, will the area have the opportunity to be closed off to parking for those major events?
Yes, that has been set up that way that we can use that for potentially for event space as well. That was part of the design, and there's been ensuring we've got power and services and things as well to make sure that that can happen.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Spray.
Kia ora. Kia ora, Amy. I might have answered my own question while I was waiting. Local firm DCA, is that Darrell Church Architecture? Thank you.
Lots of locals. That's good. Councillor Wang.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and tēnā korua. Majority of my questions have also been asked by Councillor Yates, but I had one quick few questions. One was to do with the coda habitats, and how has that process been?
So yeah, we've specifically created coda habitat in terms of put in rock formations for that purpose, and then we've also slightly tweaked some of the other rock formations on the advice from the specialists in terms of ensuring that areas that we weren't necessarily planning for coda habitat are suitable. So that's where you see like the big rock formations that we have. They've said come in and put a few smaller rocks in the gaps, because actually then it makes it safer for the coda in terms of catfish predation. So so definitely the work has been done to make that a good home for coda. In terms of coming in and counting them, and none of that work's happened yet, but that in due course there will no doubt be work to have a look and see numbers when we've finished the work.
Thank you. And I guess following on from that, so that would be some work being done with the Te Arawa catfish killers?
So Ian Kusabs, I think, is the expert there in terms of the coda habitat and so on. And I'm not sure of his involvement with the Te Arawa catfish killers group.
That's fine. Thank you. And again, I'd just like to say, it has been really, really heartwarming to see how much has been completed through that drone footage, and also visiting the Memorial Plaza on the day that it was open and seeing the car park full of people checking it out. It's pretty cool, pretty awesome to see. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, can you give us an update on the design phase for the commercial building that's going to go into place roughly where the sound shell was? I understand it's to provide retail outlets and to house the current operators.
I might actually,
JP here?
I see JP's in the room. He would be most knowledgeable.
This comes into the economic development area in terms of it's not, the commercial building is not part of this lakefront, I guess, project budget, but JP has been doing some work in that space. So,
good morning, everyone, and my apologies for lateness to the meeting. Just picking up on that one, as Amy led off there, all the way through we've maintained that there was a commercial footprint within the lakefront, and we went through a process to seek a preferred investor who would lead the development of that building, which would house some lakefront activities, food and beverage, and also house the current operators. So that's all was anticipated within the concept for the lakefront. So Amy's currently managing a piece of work that we've got going on, which is to identify a footprint design, which helps us finalise, we hope, the tenancies, so that we have a completed investment memorandum for that preferred investor to do it singularly or seek further investors to undertake that development on the lakefront.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. And final question by Councillor Kawate.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The extensive boardwalk, which looks fantastic, the ongoing or monitoring for repairs and maintenance, is that now delegated to or come under Infracore? Who will be doing that?
Excuse me, and through you, Madam Chair. There'll be there's a period, obviously, where the boardwalk and everything is still the responsibility of the contractors through a defects period, and then it will come within our open space maintenance program that we currently have with Infracore. So yeah, they will be picking that up.
Thank you very much. Well, that appears to be all the questions for the lakefront update. Thank you very much, Amy. Thank you to your team. We will continue with the operations group report, though, if there are any questions for Jocelyn as the manager, and that is from page 21 to page 30. Yes, Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Chair. Through you. I noted under the strategy, the previous section, strategy group, there's a section on emergency housing, and my question under operations, is there an operational report on emergency housing?
not at this stage.
I wondered, through the chair, if there's any possibility of an update on operations to do with emergency housing. Thank you.
Point of order, Madam Chair. I'm not sure that Rotorua Lakes Council is the provider of emergency housing, so I wonder why, if the Chief Executive could say whether or not we would be providing an operational report in respect of emergency housing. We're not a provider.
I think that the answer to that's obvious. We're not in the operational business of providing emergency housing. But however, I do want to take Councillor McPherson's point on board. We have been given updates where possible and when needed on housing. And if there's any urgent questions that you have on that, then I'm happy to take that in the confidential section.
Well, it is of great interest in to follow up. It's of great interest to the public on the progress that's being made on housing as a practical matter. And the emergency housing description under strategy indicates how there's a working group at work, and my question then is, has that translated across into operations yet? And if it has, what's the nature of those operations? But it's not part of the operational report. Thank you.
Point of order, Your Worship.
I agree that you've answered that entirely appropriately. Councillors have been updated and confidential on the work that we're doing in partnership with iwi and government, and will be notified when the time is right. We've all been briefed.
No, my point was, when will that information about operations in this area come into the public domain? I'm puzzled as to why it would be constantly regarded as a confidential matter. Surely not. Thank you.
You're welcome, Councillor McPherson. And if I can note, when it has come up in the agenda, we have been quite clear and transparent as to why housing updates have gone into confidential, and often that is because of commercial sensitivity, as council as an organisation has conversation and deals with partner organisations that do provide that as a service operationally, and of course all that we can do to assist, because we understand the significance to the community and we are wanting to do the best that we can, and I assure you that our staff are working very hard and in good partnership with those who are able to help as well. It's an issue that's not just for one person, it's going to be a community solution to find that and solve it. So we will move on if there are any other questions on the operations group. There appear to be none. Oh, sorry, Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My apologies, I just found my mark through you. Jocelyn, just in relation to new dwelling consents, you've got the number of new dwelling consents for the financial year to date as 172 compared to 171 in the 1920 financial year. So there doesn't appear to be a lift. Are we seeing a lift in the current year, or is that an historical number that we're just trucking along at?
It may be the way that it's reported, but actually so far we've got 3 months left in our financial year, so we're at the same point that we did for the entire year with 3 months left to go, with March having 27 approved. So we have seen an uplift. We've definitely seen an uplift.
So we're potentially a quarter of a year ahead of last year.
Try not to do maths in public, but yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Wang.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Jocelyn, again. Firstly, I'd just like to say I've really appreciated the art campaign in the CBD with the chalk art, and I have to say my favourite one is of the St Bernard with the face mask on. My question was on Te Whare Taonga o Te Arawa, and the has there been any work done into looking into pop-up exhibitions?
Kia ora. My understanding is we're working at the moment on a pop-up exhibition for later on in the year, and so we'll look forward to bringing some news around that as that piece of work progresses, but yes, we are looking at that for sure.
That appears to be, oh, sorry, one more, Mr. Hurd.
Thank you. My question is about subdivision consents for new residential lots. Just looking at the numbers there, we don't seem to have a comparison with the previous year. So I'm interested, first question, in the trend versus previous years. And secondly, it doesn't seem to be a very high number given the number of houses that we want to build. Do you have a comment on that?
I will get the team to ensure that we have that comparison for you moving forward, and I actually did note that this morning, so we'll make sure that that's included moving forward. And I actually asked Jason about the 3 subdivisions. What he noted was that there's a bunch that are all tied up together at the moment, and so sometimes some months there'll be not very many, and then other months we'll get a few come through at a time. So that's the reason that the report looks that way, but I will ensure that we have the comparison in there for you moving forward, or for everyone. Kia ora.
Thank you very much, Jocelyn. We'll now move to our infrastructure group. I'd like to invite our manager, Stavros Michael, up, and we are on page 30 now, if anyone has any questions for Stavros. Welcome.
Kia ora tātou katoa. Through you, Madam Chair. Good morning, Morena. I will leave the report as reads, Madam Chair, as there are 3 or 4 points I would like to sort of elaborate on, if I could. First of all, though, I would like to extend on behalf of all of us condolences and deepest sympathies to the Tonkin and Taylor company, who you heard yesterday. 2 climbers died on Mount Taranaki, geologists. Both of these climbers, or geologists, Richard Phillips and Peter Kirkwood, are very respected colleagues of ours who've been working closely with them for a number of years in regards to mapping our geohazards in the district, land development and so on. Both leave young families behind, so I would like to pay tribute to, to those colleagues and obviously their families. Thank you. Second point, and again with the occasion of recent discussions in regards to our operations report for infrastructure. In recent days, I have a number of meetings with residents which regularly ask the question, what do we get from for our services, for our rates? And a bit of a tongue-in-cheek, I just wanted to sort of give you a quick snapshot as to what we provide on a daily basis. On average, about 150,000 toilet flushes, about 75,000 showers, about 30 million litres of good quality drinking water, as you saw earlier, that we meet all the drinking water standards, about 250,000 vehicle movements a day, about 8,000 collections of waste for each, for proper purposes every day. Just a quick snapshot to give some color to an otherwise sometimes a bit of a colorless infrastructure report. So I thought it might be useful for you to to keep in your mind when you're considering what we actually do on a daily basis, and you can multiply it by week, by year, and then you can get the volume of work you do govern to deliver. I'm also pleased to note that in terms of our efforts to maintain a stable infrastructure, our programs are almost finished at the moment, both in transportation and three waters and in all of our activities. And of course, it's a very important emphasis we place in renewals, because if we don't keep with our renewals profile, that means the condition of our infrastructure in general to deliver these daily services I just outlined is compromised if you don't have a stable infrastructure. We continue to work with our partners and colleagues to finalize the process to complete the final 1/4 of the Rotorua wastewater reticulation scheme. On the 14th of May, we will have another meeting with a strategy group of the Rotorua Lakes Water Quality Partnership between the Crown, the Bay of Plenty Regional Council and ourselves. And obviously that's another area where we will continue to seek the assistance of the Ministry of the Environment to fund those reticulation schemes. Again, because those schemes have been in progress for a number of years, since 2005 actually, you have agreed to instigate wastewater reticulation projects. You should be aware that to date, we, with the final quarter of Rotorua scheme, Rotorua Lakes Council will complete all the agreed programs of 2005. Once that is completed, you would have reticulated about 2,500 houses now, and with capacity for another 2,000 houses or 1,500 houses for the future. So it's a total of about 4,000 properties reticulated for wastewater. The achievement of that, the significance of that is that your programs of work will ensure no wastewater leachate enters into the lakes anymore. And that has got both environmental nutrients reduction into the lake, but also a significant improvement to the lake's water health quality, bathing water standards. No pathogens will enter into the lakes. So with the Rotorua is the last one of the targeted programs we have started in 2005. The gross cost of these projects are around $85 million. To date, the local share is meant to be 50%. The funding we receive from the MFE at this point in time only reflects about 38%. So we are making a business case, an argument to say that the MFE needs to contribute another 12% to reach the target level of 50-50. And we will advise you in due course as to what the next outcome in the next process will be. Tarawera, we have a number of processes there. We had an initial letter on the 3rd of February to all the ratepayers. We had a public meeting in April in Tarawera, and we followed with a second letter which expects responses by the 15th of May, and no doubt you will get LTP submissions to that effect to consider. Just for your information, at this point in time, we have somewhere in the region about 260 responses, about 65% in full support, about 30% of these responses are supportive of the scheme, but they're requesting some flexibility in funding, and 5% are dead against it. So, it's not a bad mix, but we still expect to have more responses to that effect. And the fifth item on my highlights, I suppose, is the Three Waters reforms process. The Department of Internal Affairs will proceed over the next few weeks to make a report to the Ministry of Internal Affairs, and from there to a panel of ministers for recommendations about the formation or the proposed formation of new Three Waters entities over the next 2, 3, 4 years, and obviously the outcomes of that will be reported back to the Council, and we participate in the collation of information and exchange of information with the Department or DIA to that effect. That's all I wanted to highlight, and I'm more than happy to take any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Stavros. Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, Stavros, just on page 36, the travel demand management paragraph. Great to see staff out monitoring the implementation of the trial of Te Manawa or Whatiura and the Safe Ways to School that's started in Linmore this term. But the bullet point above, the survey for Western Heights Primary in Kaitau, with a 30% response rate. So was that survey done through the schools or with parents? How was that done? You're able to enlighten me? It seems a low response rate, that's all
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. There's a working party involving officers, school professional staff and parents, representing the kids in that area. And information went back to all the people using that area, and the response rate, it is low, but in most cases, the anecdotal evidence is that most parents who taking kids to school, they expected to see safety improvements, and the access to school. So I don't know, I'm not an expert in public response, but at the end of the day, it seems that when people think that something is okay to proceed, they don't bother to respond. If they have strong views about it, they might respond, but we will interpret it that those who have strong views, they respond. Those who just say, I'm okay with that, they'll wait, and we'll leave it at that. Thank you.
It's a supplementary, Madam Chair. So you're saying that of the 30% who have responded, they're looking for an improvement in Safe Ways to School, is that right?
It's absolutely. The responses are all in favour of improvements. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Councillor McPherson, followed by Her Worship, and then Councillor Kaifon.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, two questions relating to the information on page 33 about wastewater upgrades. I noted that there's a funding adjustment with regard to Rotorua that's been applied for. It's been lodged with MFE. And I wondered, with the connection, that therefore translates into a question about the possible connection costs for Rotorua. And I wondered if they're going to be pretty much the same as the Rotorua connection charge. And second, supplementary to that, is there also going to be financing options developed, because that was one of the outcomes of the Tarawera discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McPherson. I'll take one thing at a time. Rotorua at this point in time is a proposal. Rotorua has not been into the program of the deed funding as it was agreed for a number of historical reasons. However, with the proximity completion of Rotoiti and Rotoma, it makes perfect sense, and there are those communities there comprising about 110 properties. They expressed the view they would like to be connected. The general funding approach is that local share is about 50% of the costs, and the other 50% comes from the Ministry of the Environment. We have applied to the Ministry of the Environment and we're waiting their decision to that respect. For the local share, I would assume, but of course that is always going to be subject to your decision once we put a report to you. Once we have certainty about the funding from the MFE, their position, we report back to you to say the estimated cost is X, the subsidies are Y, the net cost are Z. How would you like that to be paid? But I would assume that would be inconsistent not to apply the same principle that we have applied to Rotorua.
Very much for that. Is it possible at this stage to indicate whether or not the Tarawera project is going to have a separately developed set of financing options? Thank you.
No, I cannot answer that question because of the decision for your consideration of the LTP. I'm sure you, as you're all aware, you received verbal and written submission to that effect, and you will consider in the LTP. Thank you.
I'm happy to leave that question on the table. Thank you.
Thank you. Your Worship, the Mayor.
Just a question, and thank you very much for the detailed facts around the pump station at Hona in Ngāpuna. Has there been a follow-up meeting with the community and the hapu where we can go and address some of the misinformation that was put in the public domain?
Thank you, Your Worship. A meeting was planned for the 29th, but then it was postponed because the MP was not available to be present at the time. So I understand we're waiting for an alternative suitable date for them, but we are going to go and meet with the community and discuss these issues.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kaifong.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question around fresh water. Just remind me, the recommendation from the Lakes Community Board was for a report to be commissioned for non-council water sources? Was there to be some report to look at where communities were providing their own water sources through bores or their own reservoirs?
Thank you, Councillor Kaifong. I think there is it's the water bill that's currently in the process of Parliament to be enacted, become an act. It has not translated into an act yet, but it's almost certainty that councils will have an increasing duty of assigned a duty of care to ensure that currently unreticulated or uncontrolled water systems or schemes, are falling under the council, under TLA's responsibilities. Of course, what complicates matters a little bit more because it's in parallel with that, got the formation, this proposed formation of the three waters reforms. And as you recall, as part and parcel of the LTP draft process, we have recommended that as from next financial year, we will start identifying some of those unreticulated communities for water supply and report back to you on a case-by-case basis how we propose to implement it. So we already started that master planning for that, but the bill has not been converted into an act yet.
Just a supplementary to that. So then in terms of the proposed developments along the western side of the city, so we've been concentrating on stormwater planning, but is there sufficient supply of fresh water for all of the proposed developments if those houses were to be built?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Kaifong. If you recall, as part of your LTP consultation process, you also put out to the public your draft infrastructure strategy. That infrastructure strategy has been designed with minds to be able to fulfill the future demand for all our spatial plan, both in water supply, stormwater, and sewage services. So we have your infrastructure strategy covers all these needs, and we are comfortable that our consenting process, demand management, and alternative options are available for us to explore as demand increases for that.
Thank you. Councillor Wang, followed by Yates and Donaldson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Stavros. Recently, Mrs. Trumper and I went to visit the Smart Environmental Plant in Kopu, the materials recovery facility, and understood that 26% of all recycling is contaminated, and that amount ends up in the landfill. So with the what education program is council conducting to reduce the number of offenders contaminating the recycling?
Thank you, Councillor Wang. Just can I link back into what Ona presented earlier? We have undertaken and we continue to undertake a systematic auditing of bins, and to some degree we go back to the people, the householders, and say, well, your bin has been, or especially the recycling bin, it looks to contain a lot of contamination. Please pay attention to XYZ. There is an escalating response process, and if you have read recently in Christchurch, there are hundreds of bins being confiscated by the Christchurch City Council because people were contaminating their recycling with general waste. We're not at that stage yet, but people sometimes feel a little bit sort of reactive and negative, towards that. So we're doing the audits, we're advising people, and as a final resort, we will obviously we may apply drastic measures to it, but we're nowhere near that stage yet. But certainly it's an increasing problem we need to address. Thank you.
Thank you, Stavros. And that was going to be my second question about Christchurch, removing the bins after repeated warnings for those repeat offenders. So thank you.
Councillor Yates.
Tēnā koe, Stavros, and through you, Madam Chair. With the mention of Hona Road in particular and the misinformation that's been there in a proposed meeting with the Waiariki Member of Parliament, can you please reassure me that previous communication with our Ngāpuna whānau had been continual and that meetings had or still were being developed with our Ngāpuna whānau prior to that particular event?
Thank you, Councillor Yates. I can assure you that, Council and especially my teams have had an ongoing engagement with the Ngāpuna community on a number of levels. One of the things we've done with the Ngāpuna community, notwithstanding some of the long-standing grievances they've got about the development of industrial zones around them and so on, which we are sensitive and cognizant of that. But however, about 4 years ago, we worked with the community and we installed new footpaths, new speed control system, new lighting system, new pedestrian crossings, bus shelters, again with their involvement into that process. More recently, we had worked with the community to replicate the supply, the sewer pipeline that goes from the Hona pump station to the treatment plant, to have a contingency. And again, it was part and parcel of a risk mitigation process. We have sought their permission to retain an alternative pipeline, and actually proved very crucial to that incident on 29th of March, because having that alternative pipeline, it ensured there was no untreated sewage spillage anywhere. We simply responded to a fault. Now, also, I need to emphasize too that we have about 81 pump stations around the district, and by necessity, these pump stations sit near community residential houses because that's where they collect wastewater from. So it's not a unique case, but obviously we try to communicate with affected parties, and especially with the Ngāpuna community. We work with the community in terms of their pouring a reference group for restoration projects. Is part in terms of our wastewater treatment plant resource consents, in terms of the sustainable foresting approach for our discharge point, and we'll continue to work in that direction. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and it's a very relevant question, and I must say I was very disappointed by that MP in particular for the misinformation and the political stunt that he attempted that was only damaging and hurtful to the very people he was attempting to help. So as elected members are aware, I sent out an email very quickly requesting that we respond to him and offer to meet with him so that he is fully informed. But yes, thank you very much. Councillor Donaldson, followed by Councillor Bentley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Stavros, just touching on that last point you raised, the Puringa Reference Group, Madam Chair, had a site visit to the wastewater treatment plant with the both the C&I board member and iwi rep for East Side, who learnt a lot, actually, through the visit to the wastewater treatment plant and the subsequent discharge options in the forest. So, that work, communication with the community is ongoing. But my question is on page 38 through you, Stavros. Just in relation to the harvesting at the landfill. I'm interested in the tree removal. I take it it's Pinus radiata, and I see there we're replanting. Could you just expand on that, just the area involved, the benefits, just either environmental, carbon credits, log prices, all of that, and why we're doing it? Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor. I won't go into a lot of detail about the landfill, but as you mostly recall, our landfill comprises two parts. The old part, stages 1 to stage 5, the newer part, stages 6. Stage 6 is the one that has been cut and sealed in recent years. Stage 1 to 5 is not lined underneath, but it's got some sealant on lining on top. When it was completed, trees were planted around that over a period of at that point in time, but the trees have grown and roots started degrading the lining and allowing stormwater to penetrate into the body of the landfill. So both the trees reached an age of harvesting, but also their roots became detrimental to the integrity of the lining. So we removed the trees. We got revenue from selling of those trees, and we paid for rectification works on the top of stage 1 landfill. Now we are planting more selectively around the periphery of the landfill to make sure we have better environmental outcome, but also plant them in a way that will not compromise the integrity of the landfill or the body of the landfill to create additional leachate flows. Yeah.
Just supplementary, Madam Chair. So the future planting will be more for environmental purposes rather than commercial harvesting.
Correct. Yep.
Thank you. And final question from Councillor Bentley.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and this is further to a discussion that my Maggie has been having with the Mayor, which as regards defibrillators and the location of. Do we have an app which demonstrates as to where all the defibrillators are stationed around town? And second part of the question is, are the staff that in the vicinity and our city guardians, for example, are they all fully trained in how to operate these defibrillators?
Sorry, Councillor Bentley. I know where we have defibrillators into the building. Our safety wardens are fully trained to use it. I cannot answer where, if we know whether defibrillators around the city are in private premises, and I don't really know. I don't know how many individuals have that kind of training to use defibrillators, but to my personal knowledge, it's not a difficult thing to operate. But I hope I don't have to use it.
Well, Her Worship, the Mayor can answer that question for you, Councillor Bentley.
But I can't answer. Councillor Bentley is the name of the app. I don't remember. But there is an app. And Richard Horn is undertaking training and progressively rolling out the training. And I've also suggested it would be very good training for councillors and elected members to have on the use of a defibrillator. We used to do that in Parliament, and it was needed once. So I think it's a great thing if we all learn. And thanks for raising the awareness, because you never know when you're going to get caught. And I did have an incident at the airport here, where we had to use the defibrillator, and that gentleman survived. So it is important that we all learn.
Ms. Spray.
Kia ora, Stavros. My question is about all the work going on with the Three Waters reforms. Has our council made a decision about handing over the transfer of our assets to the new organisations being set up by the government?
No, we haven't. The reality is that the ministers have not actually have not reached a resolution yet, and they have not asked councillors, or councils across the country to make a decision yet. But in the next few months, we will be asked to either opt in or not have an option to opt in. It's just you opt in and there's no other option. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Chair. It's a supplementary to the question just asked by Ms Bray. That is, when do you think you'll be in a position, you and the CEO will be in a position to give us a full clarification on those discussions over Three Waters? It's some time since we've had an update. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McPherson. I would expect that the meaty discussion, the in-depth discussion will take place around July. We expect the ministers to make a decision as to the next phase, and that's the point in time where you as elected members need to receive full information about it and to the best of our ability have a conversation as to the options and implications.
Thank you. We'll go back to Her Worship, and then Councillor Maxwell has a final question.
Yeah, it is a timely topic, and at the Zone 2 meeting that was held here, they turned the zone meeting into a focus on Te Mana o Te Wai, and that was led by Internal Affairs and the Working Party, and it was hugely attended. There were over 300 there at that meeting. Subsequent to that, we've had a very good workshop for elected members and Te Tātou members here for us to look at our view on this. It's just a view at this stage, and what are our bottom lines. So we're very well prepared. Te Tātou have been part of that. It's just how we keep moving that conversation along.
Thank you. Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you. And this is all following on from the Three Waters conference held out at the Holiday Inn. Somebody left their glasses behind. So I've been trying to find the owner. I thought this might help, and live stream is out there to thousands. I thought it was the mayor's, but she said no, she couldn't afford these.
Thank you very much, Councillor Maxwell. Well, that concludes our infrastructure report. And Councillor Bentley, we have found the app. It's called ICE, which is in case of emergency, and it's a medical contact card. So that app can be found, and thank you for raising that. Well, we will now go into public excluded. I'd like to thank the public in the media and those live streaming who have tuned in. And I'd like to advise that there are 3 items for consideration in the public excluded session. First of all, confidential minutes from the previous operations and monitoring meeting. Second, the landfill update. And third, payroll